So you're telling me this is your car? The officer's smirk faded as he gripped his cuffs tighter. The black man had the keys, the registration, yet none of it mattered. Step out of the vehicle. Then, backup arrived. Guns were drawn. The truth came too late, and what happened next left the entire city in shock. Marcus Washington adjusts his tie in the rearview mirror as his BMW idles at the red light. 3 weeks of ownership, and the new car smell still lingers, a reminder of making partner at Williams and Sternlaw after 9 grueling years. The jazz playing through the premium speakers cuts off as blue and red lights flash behind him. His stomach tightens into a familiar knot. The BMW's leather steering wheel grows slick beneath his grip as he positions his hands at 10 and 2, visible, non-threatening. His father's voice echoes in his head. Yes, sir. No, sir. Come home alive. Marcus has been pulled over 17 times since getting his license at 16. Never once received a ticket. Officer Dennison approaches, swagger unmistakable, hand already resting on his holster. The flashlight beam hits Marcus's eyes before sweeping across the luxury interior. License and registration, Dennison demands. No greeting, no explanation for the stop. Marcus keeps his movements slow, telegraphed, as he reaches for the glove compartment. So, you're telling me this is your car? The officer's smirk forms as he examines the temporary paper registration. His emphasis on your hangs in the humid evening air, carrying weight beyond its 4 letters. Yes, sir. Purchased from Riverside BMW 3 weeks ago, Marcus replies, voice steady despite the acid burning in his stomach. He's rehearsed this scenario countless times, in his head, with friends, with mentors. Black man, expensive car, wrong neighborhood. The radio on Dennison's shoulder crackles, his eyes narrow. Step out of the vehicle. May I ask why I'm being detained? Marcus keeps his tone respectful but firm, law degree kicking in despite his racing pulse. We've had reports of a stolen BMW matching this description. Officer Dennison's hand tightens around his handcuffs. Marcus knows there haven't been any such reports. The lie is as transparent as it is familiar. As he carefully exits the vehicle, hands visible, 2 more patrol cars screech around the corner, bathing the street in emergency lights. Neighbors emerge from their homes, cell phones raised. 6 officers now surround Marcus, hands hovering near weapons. Possible vehicle theft suspect detained. Dennison speaks into his radio, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. Then a voice cuts through the tension. Washington? Marcus Washington? A tall black officer steps forward from the 2nd patrol car. Captain James Morris, his father's friend from church, a 20-year veteran of the force. Recognition flashes, but Officer Dennison steps between them. Sir, we have a potential stolen vehicle situation. I know this man, Morris states firmly. With all due respect, Captain, that doesn't change protocol. Dennison's hand remains on his weapon, his authority challenged but not surrendered. The neighbors' phones continue recording as Marcus stands motionless, trapped between the officers, his own car now feeling like hostile territory. What happens next will send shockwaves through the department and the entire city. Captain Morris steps forward, authority radiating from his posture. Let me see that documentation. He extends his hand toward Dennison, who hesitates before reluctantly surrendering the papers. Morris studies the registration and license, then looks up. This registration matches the vehicle and Mr. Washington's identification perfectly. There's no issue here. Dennison doesn't back down. Temporary registration could be falsified, and dispatch clearly mentioned. What dispatch call? Morris interrupts, his expression hardening. I monitor all calls in this sector. There was no stolen vehicle report for a BMW tonight. The gathered officers shift uncomfortably as realization ripples through them. Among them stands Officer Kira Chen, younger than the others, her discomfort visible as her eyes dart between Marcus and Dennison. These stops were coordinated as part of the department's proactive policing initiative, Dennison argues, his voice lower now. Marcus's jaw tightens. The initiative, a euphemism for racial profiling at the borders between predominantly black neighborhoods and affluent areas. The invisible line Marcus had crossed driving home from work. "I'd like to file a formal complaint regarding Officer Dennison's conduct," Marcus states, his attorney voice emerging despite his racing heart. This stop had no legal basis. The crowd of neighbors has grown. Cell phones continue recording, flashlights illuminating the scene. Among the faces, Marcus recognizes Mrs. Patterson from 3 doors down. Her husband chairs the Public Safety Committee on the City Council. Their eyes meet, and something shifts in her expression as understanding dawns. Dennison steps closer to Marcus, anger flashing. "You're interfering with police business. One more word and—" "He's what, Dennison?" Captain Morris cuts in. "A partner at Williams and Stern Law? The firm handling the review of excessive force complaints against our department. Is that the identification you failed to properly read?" The revelation hangs in the humid night air. Marcus isn't just any black driver in an expensive car. He's the attorney reviewing police misconduct cases, perhaps the very reason Dennison pulled him over. Officer Chen steps away from the group, motioning urgently to Captain Morris. "Sir, I need to speak with you privately." As they step aside, Marcus notices something about Dennison's uniform. The body cam indicator light is off. "Your camera isn't recording," he points out, loud enough for others to hear. "Equipment malfunction," Dennison replies automatically, too quickly. "We're recording," someone shouts from the crowd, phones raised higher. Morris returns with Chen, whose face is strained with moral conflict. She looks directly at Marcus, then at Dennison. "Captain, I need to report that Officer Dennison ran Mr. Washington's plates before initiating the stop, not after as protocol requires. The system showed clear ownership. There was never any question about stolen status." Dennison's face contorts with rage. "You're finished, Chen. You don't betray your own—" "No," Morris intervenes, "but you might be." Everyone, cameras remain on. "Mr. Washington, you're free to go. Officer Dennison, you're coming back to the station with me." Marcus exhales for what feels like the first time in minutes. He takes a step toward his BMW, reaching into his pocket for his keys. "He's reaching!" Dennison shouts, drawing his weapon in one fluid motion. Other officers instinctively follow suit, guns now aimed at Marcus, whose hand freezes halfway to his pocket. Time stretches like elastic. The crowd gasps collectively. Mrs. Patterson's hand flies to her mouth. Chen's eyes widen in horror. Marcus stands perfectly still, acutely aware that the next few seconds could determine whether he lives or dies. The world narrows to heartbeats and held breath. Marcus stands frozen, arms slowly rising, half-extracted car keys dangling from his trembling fingers. 5 service weapons point at his chest. Bystanders gasp. Time stretches impossibly thin. "Stand down! All officers, weapons down now!" Captain Morris's voice cracks like thunder across the tableau. 4 officers immediately lower their guns. Dennison's remains level, unwavering. "I said stand down, officer." Morris's command comes sharper now, edged with barely contained fury. "He was reaching," Dennison begins. "For his keys," Marcus interrupts, voice steady despite everything. The keys glint in the flashing lights. "They're right here, visible. Like my hands have been this entire time. Like my father taught me. Like his father taught him." Sweat trickles down Marcus's temple, despite the cool evening. His heart pounds against his ribs like it might break free. He's stood before the Supreme Court with less anxiety than he feels now on this suburban street corner. "You don't understand what we're dealing with," Dennison says, gun still raised. "You sit in your office reviewing cases, But we're out here every day seeing the patterns, the statistics. I understand patterns perfectly, Marcus replies, each word deliberate. I've been pulled over 17 times. No tickets, no violations. The pattern isn't about crime. It's about power. It's about fear. The gathered crowd has fallen silent, witnessing something raw and true. Cell phones continue recording, but their owners seem to have forgotten they're holding them. This isn't just about tonight, Marcus continues. It's about a system where your body cam can be conveniently off, where he was reaching becomes justification, where having the right documentation still isn't enough. Dennison's jaw tightens. You people always make it about race. I'm doing my job, protecting this neighborhood. From what? Marcus asks. From me? A homeowner? A taxpayer? Or from what I represent to you? Something dangerous flashes in Dennison's eyes. His finger shifts slightly on the trigger. In one fluid motion, Captain Morris steps directly between Marcus and Dennison's gun. The crowd gasps collectively. Officer Chen's hand moves to her own weapon. James, don't! Marcus begins, using the captain's first name, suddenly terrified for this man he's known since childhood. Lower your weapon, Dennison, Morris says quietly. That's a direct order. You're choosing them over us, Dennison hisses. Over your brothers in blue. I'm choosing justice, Morris replies. Something I should have done years ago when I first saw your conduct report. Something this department should have done when you were transferred from the 5th Precinct for similar incidents. Officer Chen steps forward, standing beside Morris. Sir, I have documentation. Her voice shakes but holds. For 6 months, I've been recording Officer Dennison's stop patterns. He specifically targets Black and Latino drivers in luxury vehicles. He runs plates looking for minorities in white neighborhoods. The revelation hangs in the humid night air. This isn't about one bad officer. It's about a system that transferred him instead of addressing the problem. About colleagues who stayed silent. About reports buried. 2 senior officers approach from behind. One grips Dennison's wrist, forcing his weapon down. The other takes his sidearm. The standoff ends not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a holster being emptied. As Dennison is escorted to a patrol car, the accumulated tension leaves Marcus's body all at once. His knees buckle. He sinks to the curb, hands shaking uncontrollably now that survival is no longer in question. Officer Chen sits beside him, not speaking at first, just witnessing his humanity. 17 times, Marcus finally says, voice hollow. Sir? Chen looks confused. I've been pulled over 17 times since I got my license at 16. No tickets. No violations. He looks up at her. Each time I wondered if this would be the one where my parents got that phone call. I'm sorry, Chen says softly, the words inadequate, but sincere. Captain Morris approaches, returning Marcus's license and registration. This isn't over, he says, his face worn with the weight of the night's events. But it's going to be different this time. For the first time, Marcus allows himself to believe that might be true. Not because one officer stood up, but because dozens of witnesses had seen the truth with their own eyes. Mrs. Patterson is already on her phone, likely calling her husband on the city council. The videos are uploading to social media in real time. The blue wall of silence has been breached, not by force, but by exposure to light. The system stands revealed, not just one individual. And that changes everything. Resolution. 3 weeks later, the polished mahogany table in City Hall's conference room gleams under fluorescent lights. Marcus adjusts his tie, facing a row of uncomfortably shifting officials. Police Chief Rodriguez, Mayor Wilson, 4 City Council members including Mr. Patterson, Captain Morris, and Officer Chen. On the wall-mounted screen behind them plays a compilation of footage, not just from Marcus's incident, but dozens of routine stops from the past year. The pattern is undeniable. Luxury cars, black drivers, affluent neighborhoods, questionable justifications. The department has implemented immediate disciplinary action, Chief Rodriguez announces, reading from prepared notes. Officer Dennison has been terminated, and we're conducting a full review of all officers with similar complaint patterns. Mayor Wilson nods emphatically. We want to assure the community that this was an isolated— It wasn't isolated, Marcus interrupts, sliding a thick document folder across the table. And terminating one officer doesn't fix a broken system. The folder contains not a lawsuit, as they expected, but a comprehensive reform proposal. Mandatory body cam activation with penalties for non-compliance. Community review boards with actual power. Revised training. Reassignment of officers with multiple bias complaints. Data transparency. The city simply can't afford these measures, the mayor begins, pushing the folder away. The city can't afford not to, Mrs. Patterson interjects unexpectedly. All heads turn toward her. My husband and I have lived in Riverside Heights for 20 years. We thought we were safe because we had good police protection. She pauses, meeting Marcus's eyes. Now I realize some of my neighbors weren't being protected. They were being targeted. The room falls silent. Mr. Patterson takes his wife's hand, nodding slowly. The video from that night has over 2 million views, he adds. People are watching how we respond. Chief Rodriguez clears his throat. We can implement some of these measures immediately, particularly the body cam compliance protocols and complaint review process. The meeting continues with careful negotiation. No magical transformation, but concrete steps forward. When they break 2 hours later, real commitments have been secured, if not everything Marcus proposed. In the hallway afterward, Captain Morris approaches Marcus. They're only doing this because of who you are, a lawyer with connections. That's not justice. I know. Marcus acknowledges, straightening his jacket. My father couldn't have gotten this meeting. Neither could most people who experience these stops. So what's the point? Morris asks. The system protects itself. We use the leverage we have to create space for those who don't have it, Marcus replies. My father couldn't have done this. Maybe my son won't have to. As Marcus walks toward the parking garage, Officer Chen calls after him, a bulging folder clutched against her chest. 6 months of targeted stops, she explains, handing it over. I've been documenting every questionable incident in our precinct. There are hundreds, Mr. Washington. Some had worse outcomes than yours. Why now? Marcus asks, accepting the heavy folder. Why not before? Chen looks down, shame coloring her features. Fear, conformity, the same things that let all systems of oppression continue. I needed to see someone stand up first. She meets his eyes. I'm not proud of that. Marcus nods, neither absolving nor condemning her. What matters is what happens next. That evening, Marcus drives home along the same route where he was stopped. His BMW feels different now, both a symbol of his success and a potential target. As he passes the exact corner where Officer Dennison drew his weapon, Marcus's hands tighten involuntarily on the steering wheel. He pulls into his driveway, where newly installed security cameras blink their red lights. His neighbor across the street waves cautiously, the same neighbor who had never acknowledged his existence before the incident. Inside, Marcus places Chen's folder on his desk next to newspaper headlines about the case and promised reforms. Dennison is gone, but the system remains, wounded perhaps, but not transformed. He thinks of his father's words, spoken on the day he first got his driver's license. Change doesn't come all at once, son. It comes in moments when people who could look away choose to see instead. For one night, people had seen. The body cam footage, the cell phone videos, the witnesses, they had created a moment of undeniable truth. The question that remains, that will always remain, now that they've seen, what will they do with that knowledge? How many incidents go unrecorded? How many Marcus Washingtons don't have a Captain Morris or an Officer Chen present? And most importantly, what responsibility do we all bear when we witness injustice but return to the comfort of looking away?